All right, we are rolling and we are recording. So let me give you the backdrop of what you're about to hear. This Sunday, during the service, if you tuned in, then that means you got to see us, but you couldn't hear us. So what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to give you an abbreviated version of that sermon. If you tuned in the week before that, the sermon was based off of three interactions that Jesus had while on his way to Jerusalem in the 9th chapter of Luke. If you missed that, then you can go back to last week's sermon, watch that, because this is kind of part 2 of that. Now, what I started thinking about was from that sermon that led me to the sermon where you couldn't hear me, only see me, was I wanted to offer some practical ideas and suggestions connected to last week. So the theme of last week was in Luke chapter 9, verse 62, Jesus said, "No one after putting his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God." So the main idea last week was to be a fit disciple, to be a proper disciple, if someone that wants to follow Jesus. Jesus is saying, you can't put your hand to the plow and start looking to the left and to the right, or even worse, looking backward, because what's going to happen is the lines that you're plowing in the field are going to get all messed up. And so that was the theme of last week, and I wanted to give some practical suggestions on how to better equip you to live that way. So I have 4 things for you, and the first is you need to get clear. You need to get clear about what? You need to get clear about the things that you love. And this is where I'm going to reference St. Augustine. And St. Augustine wrote a book called The City of God. You might have heard of it. If you haven't, it's a very influential book in the Christian church and even in the larger and wider society. But in it, he says this. He says, "But living a just and holy life requires one to be capable of an objective and impartial evaluation of things. To love things, that is to say, in the right order, so that you do not love what is not to be loved, or fail to love what is to be loved, or have a greater love for what should be loved less." This is something that theologians refer to as ordered loves. I want you to picture maybe rungs on a ladder, and what Augustine is saying is, in life, you're going to have all of these options, things that are vying for your life and for your attention. And some of those things are bad, what you ought to avoid, and some of those things are good. For example, your family, friends, your work, and there's nothing wrong with those things, but what St. Augustine is emphasizing is that you have to have those loves in the proper order, because whatever is at the top, you're going to dedicate your time, money, and energy to. And Augustine is saying, and I think Jesus is clearly saying, that the very top of that rung should be following and serving Jesus. Now, Martin Luther, the great reformer, had a really easy way of testing what you truly love. And in it, he talked about a pocketbook and he talked about a calendar. And so think for a moment of your life. If you were to look back at the last week and month, year of your life, and you were to sort of get a bird's eye view of where you're spending your time, if you're looking at your calendar, well, by and large, that's going to be an indicator of the things that you love, where you're spending your time. And then also your pocketbook or your checkbook. If you look back at where you're spending your money in the last week, month, year, that's also going to be a very clear indicator of the things that you love. So a challenge for you is sit down and reflect. Maybe you can even pause this video now, or after you watch it, just sit down and think about those 2 things, those 2 elements of your life. Where are you spending the majority of your time, and where are you spending the majority of your money? Those are an indicator of the things that you truly love. That's going to be at the top of the rung. Okay, now, in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, we read this verse. It says, "Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." And the term keep your heart can also be interchanged with guard your heart. And this is a very important verse. I have a couple church historians that comment on this verse, and I want to share them with you. A.W. Pink said, for the Christian to keep his heart means for him to pay close attention to the direction in which his affections are moving, to discover whether the things of the world are gaining a firmer and fuller hold on him, or whether they are increasingly losing their charm for him. Also, the momentum of sin, which always begins in the heart, is like a stone rolling down a hill. It is easy to stop at the beginning, but once it gains momentum, it becomes very difficult to stop. And so that's why Proverbs says to stand guard at your heart. And the reason why is because out of it flow the issues of life. Now I want to read to you a little bit of a word study in Hebrew, because this was originally written in Hebrew, and sometimes over the years, what was originally penned loses its strength or meaning when we translate it over years and cultures. So in Hebrew, the word mishmar refers to the act of guarding someone closely, just as an officer or warden would keep watch over a prisoner. And the phrase translated with all diligence literally means more than anything that might be guarded. And it's used here in Proverbs 4 to intensify the command of the guard. So if you're a person that likes to imagine a guard that's standing over a very important prisoner, not just your average bad guy. There's an intensity to how they're going to keep an eye on that person. Now, I've heard an illustration that Michael Hyatt gave that I think is fitting, and I heard it years ago. For me, on the road that I live, every Tuesday night I take the garbage out. And one of the things you'll never ever see me doing is standing next to the garbage all night with a sword. And the reason why is because it's garbage. It's unimportant. And you don't do that either. Nobody sets up camp to guard things that are unimportant. Garbage is to be discarded, and you don't care where it goes. Unlike the issues of the heart, we are to stand guard at the issues of our heart, because from it flow the things of life. The other reason we're to stand guard over our hearts is the Bible gives a very interesting x-ray into the heart. And it says that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, who can know it? See, the Bible paints a picture of the human heart as being wicked and very deceitful. And that flies in contrast with a lot of how you and sometimes I even make decisions. A lot of times you hear the phrase thrown around in music or in popular culture, or your friends might say this, that you just follow your heart. Well, sometimes that's not a good idea. The Bible says that the heart is deceitful, and I know one thing for sure. We like to lie to ourselves, don't we? We make decisions, and then once we make that decision, once the anchor is cast in the water, we usually don't like to move away from those decisions. But you have to be guided by the scriptures and what Jesus is saying. Why is that? Because we can't trust our feelings and emotions. They're fickle. All right. The second thing is you got to be focused. In the 6th chapter of Matthew, verse 33, Jesus says, "Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." So notice what he's saying. He's saying, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. This sounds a lot like ordered loves. And it sounds a lot like what Jesus is saying in Luke 9:62, to be focused instead of turning to the left or to the right or looking constantly behind you. So you got to stay focused in life. I heard a great quote recently, and I want to read it to you. It says, "My father used to say that if you keep looking back, you're going to trip going forward." Now, I like these kinds of things, and if you're out there listening, I'm going to read it again. "My father used to say that if you keep looking back, you're going to trip going forward." So sometimes in life, you reach a fork in the road. And I know if you're listening to this, you've had forks in the road. I've had forks in the road. And you have to make a decision. And now it becomes, what direction do you take? Do you go left or do you right? Well, you have to stay focused in life. You can't keep on wanting to go back and look left and right and look back, because you're going to trip going forward. You have to stay focused. The third thing is you have to be persistent. The reality is that there's not a single person out there, myself included, that can say honestly that they've never put their hand to the plow and started to deviate and go off the path. Nobody can say that. There's only one person that can say that and has actually done it, and that's Jesus. You see, all of us mess up along the way, don't we? And that's why persistence is important. And did you know the mark of a true Christian is not that you once repented, it's that you're continually repenting. Did you know that a mark of a true Christian is that you are persevering in your faith? It's not that everything's going to always go well. It's that things pile up on you, and what you do is you put one foot in front of the other and you move forward. And the reality is sometimes our Christian faith looks a lot more like a crawl than a sprint. And sometimes it's just a walk, and that's okay. The key is whether you're sprinting, walking, or you're crawling, you continually persevere in the right direction. I have a great quote from Calvin Coolidge. He says, "Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not, because nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not, because unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. And education will not." And he says, "Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent." All right, the fourth one is time. And I'm not talking about the wristwatch you're wearing right now. I'm not talking about daylight savings time. I'm not talking about any of those things. I'm talking about the fact that we all have an expiration date. Now, depending on your age when you're listening to this, some of you who are young, you're just going to blow this off. But as you get older, you realize you do, in fact, have an expiration date. This is what Chuck DeGroat says in Wholeheartedness. He says that every single person's life will pass like a mist. And that's what James says. In James chapter 4, he says, "You do not know what tomorrow will bring. And what is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes." So I'm going to close with a quote from the late, great evangelist Billy Graham, who said the following: "Our time and our days are numbered. One of the primary goals in our lives should be to prepare for our last day. The legacy we leave is not just in our possessions, but it's in the quality of our lives. So what preparations should you be making right now? The greatest waste in all of life, which cannot be recycled or reclaimed, is our waste of time that God has given us each and every day." Well, friends, there you have it. It's important that we stay connected, and I hope that this blessed you. And this is, like I said before in the beginning of this was just a summary, a scaled down version of the sermon on Sunday, because we thought it was important for you to connect and to journey along with us on our Lenten series and our series with Jesus and the people that he met. So this is Anthony Cloditis, pastor here at Faith, saying, I hope you have a great week. We look forward to connecting with you. If you've been blessed by this and enjoyed this, then drop me a comment. I love to read what you have, and I will interact with you. Have a good week.